before we get into some of the specifics here, I think all of us look at attrition, and I've done this my entire call center career. Attrition is just a given. It's one of those things. It's table stakes, right? All call centers attrit. No offense to Delta, but a lot of times people don't like airlines, right? So it's one of those things I think we just walk into as a complete given, and sometimes we don't spend the effort that we want to talk about today of how to disrupt that. So when we talk about disruption, I want to involve the panel and even jump in some of the conversation with the crowd here to see what have you guys done to try to change that. To give a couple specifics here and just some data points, attrition on average in call centers is about 30 to 45%, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. To give some extremes of how that math sorts out, we have some customers here that have like enterprise fleet management that has a 98% capture rate where they don't have much attrition at all. I know we have a lot of customers here with things like telemarketing, maybe credit collections, that you have super high attrition. So when you blend all those different types of call centers, and we all have different types here, different demographics, getting 30 to 45% is a high number. So what we want to do is, start here by opening up to kind of share your thoughts on, where this comes from, and how we can start disrupting this and looking to change some of that behavior.
Yeah, I don't know.
I want to start.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to start because I'm going to go way back. Right?
Okay, sure.
So
I've
been working in the contact center space since 1990, full time, studying the vendors and the space. And I remember back in the 90s at contact center shows, call center shows, when that number was 100%. When we had annual attrition of 100% in call centers, when they were just starting up, and you think about places like South Dakota, places that were very like hotbeds for call centers, and you couldn't keep people at all. So I look at any number like 40 or 50%, and I said that's terrific. I mean, that is a huge improvement over what people used to have to deal with. So in that context, we're doing a much better job than we ever did before.
Yeah, that's a great
Yep.
point.
I don't know. Can you hear me? Is this on? Okay, good. I think I go back into the 80s as well. So I may look young, but I'm a little bit long in the tooth. I think this industry is going through a transformation. We have to move from a transactional model to an experience-based model. And that's the only way you're going to be able to retain your people. We are so focused on the numbers, focused on getting people in their seats, the schedule is structured, and dealing with millennials or generation, what are we, like
X.
AA?
Yeah.
Or AAA? They want to know what's the why, what's in it for them. And why am I here? And we have not transformed as an industry. I spent some time doing some consulting in the BPO space and helping organizations, large BPOs, move from that transactional model to an experience-based design. And I think before we even get back to lowering attrition, we have to change our business model. We have to treat people as people. They're not transactions, and I think that's start. I, with Sheila, concur even earlier, several years back, we were at 100%, annual 10% attrition every month. And so if you annualize that over 12 months, I was turning off my staff in 10 months. And that was because of burnout and because of the way it wasn't managed. And we have absentee management in there where people sit in their offices and do the remote monitoring. Get on the floor, talk to your people, and be with them. That is the way you stop people from leaving. And when you do have high attrition, it should be a high promotion rate because you should be looking at their next job and doing some succession planning. So I think that's kind of a direction.
I'm going to say that it's so much better than it was 15 years ago. I'm going to look at everybody in this room and say, we are changing. We have been changing. It is getting better. People don't think about average hold time as the only measures. If you think about over the last 10 years how Net Promoter Score and CSAT are more important than average hold time, that there is an understanding that keeping a customer on the phone is not a bad thing, right? So yes, is there a way to go? Are there ways to go? Absolutely. But I think as an industry, we've made a lot of great strides. So
I think that's a great
yay
point.
us.
Yeah, I think we get so focused, and millennials almost become like a four-letter word at this point, right? But I think, Sheila, you nailed it talking about the history of call centers because it's not just the workforce that's changed, it's us as consumers, it's us as companies giving customer service because, the call centers I designed when I started in 1998, 2000, we called IVRs man traps. We didn't want to talk to our customers. We said, go away. No, we don't need you. And I think to your point, a lot of that shift, it's not just the people, it's the companies themselves.
And I think we talk about vacancy, right? Kind of, we used to say getting the rear end in the seat, and I think we've got to go back to looking at the quality hire. You know, are they going to be able to perform? Are they going to fit with your company? Are they going to stay? Because you need that if you want to start to build that customer experience.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. And that's one thing we really need to dive into. It's not just, you know, what you do with your current base of employees. Is as you naturally attrit, how do you fill that bucket up with people that won't attrit as much, right? So I think that's a thing we want to focus on quite a bit today. So that's a great lead-in. So if we look at it, and we'll bring the millennial question back up here too. What are the top 2 or 3 things from your experience that, you know, is causing this attrition? Mike, I know you talked to quite a bit of it, but a lot of statistics. I want to get kind of that real visceral, you know, feeling. I know you guys deal with it quite a bit, so feel free to dive in here as well. What you're seeing that's making people leave? I know Brad mentioned in the Philippines, people are leaving for 5 cents. And Tiago, you've had this situation not just in call centers with employees going to Salesforce. I mean, is it having Pizza Fridays? You know, what it might be. So there's a lot of things we can kind of really dive into. And obviously, it's not just 2 or 3, right? Let's really get them all on the table.
Yeah, you know, mine's not specific to this industry, but it's bad supervisors. You know, I think that's the number one for me is that people, you know, typically don't leave a job, they leave their supervisor. I think another issue that we see is, you know, you've got the repetitive work, and some people get bored. And so you've got to look at how do you keep the jobs, you know, get them to do their job and, you know, look at maybe cross-training, or maybe there's different roles within your company that they could cross-train on. And so those are probably the 2 that I would think that, and I hate to say it, the low pay and benefits. We got to be competitive there.
Yeah, so let's unpack that first one, because that's actually something I didn't think about is supervisors. Because I think sometimes we get so myopically focused on just the people sitting in the, you know, the butts of the chairs, right? Supervisors are a great point, right? A lot of times people just don't want to work for their boss, and that causes them to leave. So that, you know, it's one thing if you have, 30 agents, every one supervisor. Is it the 30 agents easier to fix, or is it that one supervisor?
I think one of the reasons that there's attrition is because there is no career path, right? And some of the questions just coming up was the career path is the problem. But I think people think of it as a temporary job. And so I think that has to be part of the hiring assessment. You know, do you think of this as, I mean, I'll be honest with you, the times that I have been a contact center agent in my career, I thought of it as a temporary job.
For sure.
I was an operator for AT&T. I did market research when I was in business school. To me, it was a temp job. So the attrition at the time was almost like natural. I expected,
Yeah.
right? So that's a question. Is it a bad thing? Okay, so let's go there. Is all attrition bad?
I don't think
I'm not sure. So
Yeah.
not all attrition is bad.
Yeah, it's like
it's
a
with the top
self-cleaning
performer.
system.
It's bad when it's the top
Right,
performers
right,
leaving, and
right,
that's what
right.
we see is that
Yeah.
your top performers leave for better opportunities they can because we haven't created that environment for them.
Yeah.
Well, I agree that it's not all bad, but it's very disruptive. There's a morale function. You put in a person in a situation they can't succeed, and they have friends and they have colleagues next to them. And so I believe it all. I mean, there's a certain part that you want to move on, but that means your hiring process has been well, so there's a defect there. But attrition is very disruptive, not just because it's not the right fit for the person, but for the other people who are still there, because they're all friends and colleagues. And they'll talk to each other, and it takes a long time to get off, especially if you haven't worked with it, not counting the time you have to invest in getting that person at least to some sort of success.
How invested are they in the actual company, right? Do they understand the mission? Do you guys actually explain because it's one thing saying, hey, please do a good job, give customer service. Do you tell them why, what the growth plan is?
Well, I think in you talk about development, I think everybody in this room as leaders needs to do that development, that contact within your organization. Most contact centers, their knowledge and what they have to handle is much more than any siloed department within your organization. They are a very valuable asset within your organization, and you need to promote them as such because they know more about the company than anyone else. I'll take an example. When I was at Lotus Development, put a program in called TAG, a tiered agent group, to retain people, and we had certain levels, and they had to do skills, and they had to do presentations, and we leveled them up. I had people knocking on my door that wanted to go to another group. They did not have to be trained in that group. They just had to know where to show up to. I turned my attrition rate into a promotion rate. I had a 60% promotion rate, where I was moving people to another department within 12 to 18 months. That's something you can sell, and it made an easy recruitment. So you need to be, as leaders, responsible for their career planning and really connect them to the organization.
Good, good. So to kind of summarize here on just some of the factors that are causing attrition, right? We've talked about leadership. We've talked about money a bit. We've talked about maybe a career path, being a part of the company culture, future direction. And obviously a lot of this centered around employee engagement. Obviously, you can't say millennial without saying entitlement, right? So, you know, how do you feed that back in? Let me get super basic. I want to kind of ask the panel here. Money's important, right? And Sheila, you said it right. They're not careers. So money is the driving factor of why these people are working. And just because of sheer economics, kind of what Brad said, you can go across the street and make 5 cents more. And you can't always just give more money because then the other guy on the side of the street gives more. And at some point, there's a breaking point. How do you address the money issue?
Well, I'll take a shot at that because
You run a contact center?
I think like any consumer product, if you compete on price, you're going to lose.
Yep.
It's about loyalty. It's about giving them an understanding of what their next career is. I go back to what I was saying before, is you're not hiring them for this job, you're hiring them for their next career. And when you do your interviewing, yes, they have to have the skills, don't get me wrong, to do this job. But quite frankly, is you're looking at further growth. You're looking at that because this is mostly a first time out of school, entry level, or second career, trying to get themselves launched. And you've got to be able to address that. So I think there's the one way to be able to overcome the cost. You're always going to have it. And you know, my father used to always say, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. You know, and try to impart on that. And as leaders, especially with young people, you have to impart some of that wisdom and hope some of it sticks. Some of it stuck with me a little bit, not much. I moved for $1, not for 5 cents. But quite frankly, you know, it's our responsibility to the next generation to impart that knowledge and that experience and hope some of it sticks.
So one of the things we haven't talked about is attrition because people feel they're not successful, right? They don't feel like they're doing the job. They're not getting rated well, whatever. And I had an interesting experience. I was in South Africa earlier this year, and at a contact center, I did a contact center visit of a company that supported ISPs, an internet service provider, right? And they were sitting in South Africa, but they were supporting Australia, okay? So the customers' calls that they were answering were in Australia. And each floor of this contact center would handle certain geographies in Australia. So there was a Melbourne floor, and there was a Sydney floor, and there was a Perth floor. And there was information and pictures and sort of marketing promotion for the agents about those cities. What are some of the places in those cities? What are some of the phrases that you're going to hear that you might not understand? And I felt like it was a sort of a soft way of imparting learning and helping them become better agents and being able to have some sort of camaraderie with the customers that they were talking to. By the way, these people were being so successful that originally they were just handling a certain kind of call. It was Telstra. Telstra is like the AT&T of Australia. They shut down their own inside sales in Australia because the Cape Town agents were doing a better job closing sales, because they were just invested in the jobs more. So I think part of it is you know, teaching, but also there's a culture aspect to it. Who are you supporting? Who are you talking to? What are they like? What do they think about? Yeah. And it was just a whole interesting aspect that I had never seen in a contact center, which made it a more fun place. You know, if there was a holiday in Australia, they would be promoting the holiday in Australia. It was just, and I mean, obviously for them it was 2 different countries, but I think there are ways of doing that. You know, like for Dish, you know, there's a new TV show happening, or the premiere of Game of Thrones, or whatever the heck it is, that sort of brings everybody together thinking about, because, you know, anyway, so just a way to think about training and culture. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything else?
I think when we talk about millennials specifically, there's a couple things that stand out for me. One is, and we've talked about the career pathing and professional development. One thing we also haven't talked about yet is they want to work for a company they're proud of. So get involved in the community. Maybe you provide them a paid day off so they can volunteer in the community. They want work-life balance. So maybe making swapping shifts easy instead of having to go through 14 signatures to get it. And finally, they want to be recognized for a job well done, but you can't be a one-size-fits-all. Some people may want a paid day off, and others may want cash bonus. So have an incentive program that gives some options so they can get recognized and rewarded for a job well done.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You know, as we're kind of going through this, I'll kind of break it into 2 things, right? I see a lot of quick fixes, which are awesome, right? Low-hanging fruit. But I think what we're all kind of driving towards here, it takes some large, bulky investments. It takes time to fix this. So one of the topics I want to open up to, and we've kind of hit on it a little bit, it's not just culture, but it's environment, right? If you guys remember like the keynote from last year with Task Gus, he spoke about millennials. If you ever look at them on Facebook, those guys are always having fun. A lot of Manila call centers. I mean, it's just a cool environment. The place looks like a skate park inside. So let's talk about environment. How does that affect how you invest in it, and what's the impact?
No, go right ahead.
I think with the environment, I mean, you got to understand your culture, right? Every company is going to be different, and what works for one may not work for another. You got to look at, if you're hiring millennials, they're going to want to have fun at work.
Yeah.
Some of it we go back to, we're talking about, are the supervisors allowing that? Are they allowing them to have the fun? I mean, I think there's a social aspect that millennials want. So maybe you get a group of people and give them a break at the same time instead of scheduling their break so they have to go to the lunchroom by themselves or the break room by themselves. So I think creating that environment where they have a say, they understand, at the end of the day, the results matter, but they have a say in what that environment looks like, and they're able to go ahead and be a part of the solution with the company as opposed to being told what to do.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah. Sheila, Mike?
It's funny, when this question came up about culture, I thought about work at homes. Because
Yeah.
I think increasingly there are work at homes, and there's a culture issue with them being part of it. And I was talking to one of the big cable companies, and they tend to try and hire people who live within 100 to 200 miles, right? So, it's somebody who had contact centers in California. And she said, here in California, it's so expensive to live, so people have to live further away in order to have a decent lifestyle, right? But we also want them close enough so that they can come in 1 or 2 days a month. So we can bring them in and have events, either training events or update culture events. And to me, that seems like the perfect mix. It's hard to have remote agents who live 1,000 miles away. I mean, I'm sure there's some companies who make that work, but being closer. But the other thing you have to do in contact center management is build that into the budget. Build into the budget that they can come and stay at the Courtyard or stay at the Hilton, whatever, right? That they get a night to come in and they don't have to try and do that in one day. You're saving, the companies are saving monies on cost of having the physical plant of the agent. That's part of the cost then, is bringing them in and having them be part of the contact center. So, talking to this, I happened to interview somebody who was doing it this way, and it's like, that's one step, right? Bringing them in every once in a while and enabling them to do that, right? Letting them not have to drive 400 miles in a day to make it happen. Give them a night in a hotel.
That's a great point. I hear that a lot of remote agents, the challenge there. And to your point with facilities, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us are guilty here, right? I've walked into a call center and be like, yep, this is a call center, right? Rows of cubicles, beige walls, and just that stale feel. I mean, a lot of people here started investing in infrastructure or trying to, the Courtyard idea, right? Make it fun. So, as we've been talking about this, one thing keeps coming back is it's about hiring. And, I kind of talk, it's one of those things, if we don't, it's one thing to fix attrition where we can lower maybe 30% to 20%, but if we don't fix hiring, we keep hiring the same people, and what happens? We keep having the same problem, right? So what are your thoughts as far as, how we change some of that practices or who we hire as far as, to change that culture?
Well, I think we've got to get out of the SAE approach, somebody, anybody, everybody type of thing. I liked what Mike was saying beforehand, is some sort of profiling and understanding what is the competency of the organization. I'm a big advocate of PI. Used it as a barometer, not a screening tool, a barometer of those people. And then when you hire in your interviewing process, really kind of, again, I go back to not focusing on the job at hand, focusing on their next job, because you're their mentor. You're the person with the experience. Are they fit for there, and connecting them within the organization. So we go through that. We've done some behavioral when I was at Lotus Development using STAR, but I believe these tools need to be incorporated with our hiring, and we're all under a lot of stress because we need to get people in now. And usually you have about a 2-week window, and we've got to cram in training, but you've got to take your time up front. It'll pay in the long run. It may hurt you now, but in the long run it'll pay.
So I have a question for you, Mike, all right, on this topic. The job of the agent has changed over the last 20 years. The things that people used to do very simply, call up to see if a check cleared, we don't do that anymore, right? Because we can do that in other ways. So the job of the agent is more problem solving and research. do your tools help pinpoint those kinds of skills? Are we upgrading the assessment tools, I guess is the question.
Absolutely. We have problem-solving skills, and you have to refresh them, right? Because the job does change, and so we, for lack of a better word, revalidate the assessments every few years to make sure that are we still measuring what we're supposed to be measuring. There's other things out there. A lot of people just use interviews, but as we talked about earlier, interviews, people can fake an interview. I mean, I'm not going to ask how many of you have a lie in your resume, but there will be some people with their hands raised that, or know of people who've lied on their resume. So
Asking for a friend.
Good
Right,
catch.
yeah, not speaking personally. But there's other things out there. There's, interview can be good because you want that personal touch, but there's pre-hire assessments, there's personalities, there's work simulations. A couple things that come to mind when you talk about hiring for me. One is you got to understand what kind of environment out. Do you have a healthy or unhealthy environment? Because if you have an unhealthy environment, you have to fix that first because you're only going to hire people that bring yourself into that. So understand your environment is important.
Yep.
One thing I'd recommend doing is we do exit interviews when people leave. Why did you leave? So why not do a stare interview? Why not take some of your high performers and go talk with them and ask them what gets them excited to stay here, as opposed to wait until they go out the door and look to change your environment that way. And one last thing I'll add is that I think if we can't do a good job of thoroughly presenting what the job is to new hires, then we're going to not be able to reduce our retention. What I'm trying to say is give them a realistic job preview, as opposed to just saying, you're going to have to answer the phone and do this. Give them a simulation and let them understand what they're getting into, so if they want to walk away, they walk away earlier than later.
I want to come back to work at home because there's a bit of a technology thing, and I'm curious. The ability for agents to chat with one another, there's been sort of like, it was very popular for a while, and then it fell off in terms of popularity. I think personally that it's a great tool for agents to be able to have a back channel to each other. I think sometimes there's a fear of certain things, right? That they're going to be doing non-work stuff, and there's ways to control for that. But I think giving them the opportunity to chat with one another is a great thing. So, question, how many people have systems that allow agent-to-agent chat? Back channel. Oh, excellent.
Wow.
Okay. So again, I don't want to be talking to them. And those of you who don't, see how broadly it is deployed, and that would be a good thing to consider. I think it's a great tool. Yep.
Great question. And so while we're on the subject of technology, I know we've hit remote agents quite a bit, but one of the questions here is, employees don't really expect for their personal life to kind of mirror things they do in their professional life. And Mike, I think you kind of touched on this, right? That's why words per minute is going down 2 per year, because people type like this now and not like this. And other things, right? We have mobile-enabled apps, and that's one of the best releases we've had because that's how agents live their life. So technology-wise, how are you guys seeing an impact with this to kind of help agents kind of bridge that personal life to employee life, if you will, in productivity?
I can definitely start there. It's funny. I have a presentation that I give that I'm not giving today, but it's called the Uberization of the Contact Center. That we all want things to be as easy as Uber in other parts of our life. And I've got a slide that I will use later that's called Uberizing the agent journey, right? Those agents also want to be able to do things on the mobile app. So, not every contact center vendor makes everything available via mobile app, but you think about somebody like the CEO of Salesforce, whose name I'm forgetting, but yours is in my head, Tiago. Benioff. I'm sorry, Mark Benioff. And he says...
Right next door.
But Benioff says, I want to be able to run my business out of this. And so if you can't today, if your agents can't do everything on here, enabling that, having that as part of your roadmap, I think is really important. Because this is how everybody's running their lives. I mean, look at this. This is hysterical.
You've been writing your notes there today. Yeah.
I've got my notes on PowerPoint, and I'm just going slide by slide here. It's
could
just
see
how we
that.
do this. It's like, it's how we live
enables
our life.
Who enables our app with mobile, with your agents? Couple?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming, yeah. And it's also true for supervisors,
Sorry,
right? I mean, I've spoken to supervisors and managers who say, I want to be able to do things like, change agent groups or move people to new groups or whatever, and do it all remotely. I mean, it's slowly coming, but it's coming.